This is Paige, the co-host of Giggly Squad, and I want to tell you about a company that I've been loving, Olive & June. Olive & June gives you everything that you need for a salon-quality manicure in one box. And if you break it down, it really comes out to $2 a manicure, which is absolutely insane. It's also so easy to get salon-worthy nails at home with Olive & June. The difference between how your nails used to look when you did them yourself and now with the Mani system is a complete game changer. The best thing about Olive & June, too, is it's a quick dry. Dries in about 1 minute, lasts for 5 days, and full coverage in up to 1 to 2 coats. Visit oliveandjune.com/perfectmani20 for 20% off your first system. That's oliveandjune.com/perfectmani20 for 20% off your first system.
Since 2013, Bombas has donated over 100 million socks, underwear, and T-shirts to those facing homelessness. If we counted those on air, this ad would last over 1,157 days. But if we counted the time it takes to make a donation possible, it would take just a few clicks. Because every time you make a purchase, Bombas donates an item to someone who needs it.
Go to bombas.com/ACAST and use code ACAST for 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com/ACAST, code ACAST.
Hi guys, welcome to this week's episode of Heavy Metal Tones with me, your podcast host Tony Evans, and you might hear in the background and occasionally get interrupted by my little hairy companion Phoebes the cat. Isn't around. She decided to jump into my recording studio, and it's quite a maze of recording bits and pieces, speakers and records and guitars and so on. So she's enjoying the jumping around behind me. And of course my computer wants to tell me to do things, which we should do. So anyway, firstly, happy birthday to us, for all us that have listened to this show for a year, that have persevered with this silly old man on this side of the speaker, on the side of the microphone. It is 1 year old today. Well, actually, when it releases, it's the next day, because it'll be a Thursday actually, but it was released here on a Wednesday. Anyway, still a year is a year, is it not? We've had some milestones, we've had some bigs, we've had ups, with some interesting stories. We've had a fantastic feedback from the guest episodes with Benji for the 2 Sabaton History crossover podcasts, which we're going to do again soon. People really like that. We've got some interviews lined up coming up. This week's episode is purely indulgent. It might have to go over 2 episodes as we speak here, I don't know. But it's purely indulgent on my part. Please indulge me, as it's my birthday. Oh, sorry. Just getting my nice hot tea. It's really cold here in Canberra at the moment. I've said it before. It's almost spring. It's lovely, but this house I've got, certain rooms are just cold. Not haunted. I wish they were. No, it's not. It's just a bit cold. Anyway, this week's episode is Marillion. I've been dancing around it for some time, and please don't go rushing to turn it off because you think they're just a load of hippie progsters. That's not true. Some of the heaviest prog you'll ever hear, some of the heaviest music you'll hear actually that's not heavy metal is actually things like Marillion. And firstly, I'm going to start with a little bit of a history of the band and how I came across them. Oh, that's better. God, it's so cold. So, I came across them. My good friend Justin. We were on a school trip. I don't know, maybe was it a school trip? We were outside school in school hours anyway, but allowed to be so. I think, in fact, it was our walk to Pickett's Lock, which is North London, where we were going to go and play snooker. We had a sports day where we could go out and do sports, and we decided to do snooker because it was still a sport. We didn't have to change for it. And we'd walk down there instead of taking the school so I'm getting distracted by Phoebes. Instead of taking the school bus, we would walk, and we would buy ourselves chips and Savaloys. One moment, excuse me, a second. Phoebes, please, I'm trying to record. All right, come on, 1 second. 1 second, guys. She's got herself trapped on the windowsill. That's what you come for, the realism. I had to stop there. She got trapped on the windowsill, and even though cats can jump, there's a lot of crap everywhere, and I don't think she felt very comfortable doing so. I've just finished my 2 fabulous big speakers to go in the music room. They're Marantz, and I really fucking love them. I've just finished upgrade. I've refurbished them. All the cabinets were fine. All the speakers were buggered. I just got new speakers in them, and it took a little bit of time to find the ones I wanted, but it's come up really nice. Anyway, so I was on this school trip with this sort of field day outside school with Justin, and we were in, I think it was Smith's, which is like a, I don't know if it's still there in the UK now. It was a newsagents, but they also sold records. And at that time, Misplaced Childhood had just been released, and it was on the racks. And Justin had been Justin. He was like the barometer of new stuff. He was really new his stuff, and he said, "Look, listen to this, guys. They're really good." Next thing I know, he's lending me a copy on a cassette, and that was it. I never looked back. Anyway, then I became extremely obsessed by the band and their output, and then so I just kept listening and finding more and more stuff, more and more bootlegs, more and more recordings, books, magazines. I even sort of drew them on the back of my jacket, the Jester. Anyway, that's my connection with the band. So it was about 85, I think that was. Maybe 85, because that's when Misplaced Child came out. But the band themselves formed in 78, 79 in Aylesbury, in Buckinghamshire. Not far from, from where I grew up. And they played in the... a lot of bands played there. Bowie, T-Rex, Thin Lizzy. Anyway, they were formed there by Mick Pointer, the first drummer of the band, who was a big prog head, and he loved Rush, so he's a big Neil Peart fan. They had Doug Irvine on bass, Neil Cockle on keys and guitar, and they were mainly keys, and Martin Jenner on guitar, and they were mainly an instrumental band, playing sort of long pieces of Genesis and Yes style music. They did this for a little while, and then to realise that they sort of needed to go a little bit further, needed to change, and some members of the band left, and Mick put an advert in the paper, and a keyboard player called Brian Jellyman joined, and next thing you know, they've still got the band. Now, they were originally called Silmarillion, which is named after a Tolkien book. It's one of Tolkien's, in fact, it was his favourite book that he wrote, sort of like the prequel to all the Lord of the Ring books. I think that's sort of what it is. I tried reading it as a youth, and I couldn't really get into it. It was a bit too much hagiography, too many kings and queens and stories to hold on to. Anyway, they basically put an advert in the paper for new musicians, and down from Scotland, a little known singer from Scotland had come down to live in Cambridge with his girlfriend and was in a band called the Stone Dome Band. Now, the Stone Dome Band weren't going very anywhere. This singer, whose name was Fish, he got that name because he liked to lie in the bath a lot. His name was Derek William Dick, You can see why he changed his name, can't you, really? Richard Dick. It's not a great name for a singer. Well, it probably is, but, Anyway, before they joined, Stephen Rothery, they were looking for a guitarist, and Stephen Rothery, the now guitarist with the band, the only guitarist really with the band, who's from Whitby in Yorkshire. In fact, my friends are there that we speak in Whitby, very nice part of the world. He saw the advert, thought, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to, stay up here and become a banker or wherever it was he was going to be, or travel down to Aylesbury and try and, live the rock and roll lifestyle. And he travelled down to Aylesbury. They accepted him in. He joined the band. And so then you've got the core of the band playing. It's a 5-piece, all right? And they wrote many pieces of music while they were still Marillion without Fish. Songs called the Herne the Hunter, the Haunting of Gill House, and so on. And they became the first songs of the new album. They became a garden party, the genesis of Garden Party, Grendel, and He Knows You Know. They first played their very first gig at a Berkhamsted Civic Hall, and that was where a then unknown young man by the name of Stephen Wilson first saw them. This was before Fish joined the band, so he saw them in a really early phase. Now, Stephen Wilson, I've talked before, I've reviewed a couple of his albums on the show. He was Porcupine Tree. He's a musical genius. He's actually, strangely, in a synergy, has remastered and rejigged quite a few of the latest Marillion albums. He's doing some Fish albums. He knows his stuff. It was at this gig that they decided to shorten the name. Of course, they couldn't be called Il Marillion, wouldn't work. So they just became Marillion. And in 1980, Doug left. So Doug left because he thought by the time he was 25, if he hadn't made it, he was never going to make it. So he was 25 in 1980 and he left. Well, how wrong was he? Really? Then again, hindsight is 20/20, right? Good for us, because once Doug left, that's when they needed to put an advert in the paper for another bass player. And at that time, they weren't looking for a singer, but the bass player Diz Minnett, or William Minnett, who was also playing in the Stone Dome band with Fish, saw the advert and thought, well, I want to go down and try out. But then they were sort of joined at the hip. So Fish said, look, I want to, if you go, I go. And he sent them a tape. He asked for tapes to be sent up from the band to him. They sent them to him. He put lyrics to it. He sent them back. They loved it so much. He said, come down. And so they both travelled down to, packed everything into their blue transit van, which later was which they called Marguerite, and Marguerite became a song that they wrote, was a live favourite. Anyway, they went down, and next thing you know, they're practicing and rehearsing in the local studios. So I'm turning paper over here. Boom, 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 boom. See, look at that. Rustle, rustle, rustle. Sip, sip, sip. Now, Fish is an extremely interesting character. If you've never seen a picture of him or don't know who he is, Google him and have a look. He's a 6'5" Scotsman from Haddington, which is in the centre of the Scottish nation. He's heavily influenced by Mark Hamill from Van der Graaf Generator. The band themselves were massively influenced by Camel. That's why they had no singer, because Camel were an instrumental band, and if you want instrumental progness at its greatest, you need to listen to Camel. Anyway, so one-time Forester, Fish, and part-time student in the Stone Dome band in the late 70s, when punk is exploding and no one wanted prog music, no one wanted anything other than a 2-minute song with any direction. They fought against the tide. But as I said, they came down, and they now had their nucleus of the band. And they went into rehearsal studios for 10 weeks at Leyland Farm Studios. Now, I've got recordings of that, and you can get them on Spotify now. I have like dodgy cassettes that are like 20th generation dubbed from a vinyl pressing from an acetate that was recorded at the studio. I mean, I've just got these, really crackly demos, but they're all been cleaned up now for Spotify and stuff. But I've got the originals, and they're really cool. They went into their on the 14th of March 1981. A lot of synergy around me and birthdays, because the album was released on the 13th of March. My birthday is the 18th of March. They started recording and rehearsing on the 14th of March. And the very first gig was on the 14th of March. Sorry, not recording. The very first gig with Fish was on the 14th of March at the Bicester Red Lion, in front of 65 people. Lucky bastards. I actually met someone who was at that gig. Gosh, man, this would be 40 years ago. I was, my first job ever left school was an usher at the movies, so tearing tickets and pointing people to the right seats and telling people to shut up and moving seats along and so on. And I was wearing a Marillion shirt. No, he came in wearing a Marillion shirt, and I said to him, "Nice one, mate." And he goes, "Yeah, I was at their very first gig." Now, whether it was true or not, who bloody knows? But Hendon isn't that far from Aylesbury, so you never know, right? And anyway, so they're touring that, okay? They're rehearsing that, and they're getting themselves ready to go on tour and do more shows and record an album. Sadly, they had to fire Jellyman, the original because he. Oh no, I'm saying we had to fire him. He left. I don't know what I'm talking about. So this is what happens when you read your notes backwards. Excuse me one second. No, next one was Mark Kelly coming in. Jellyman was the keyboard player, of course he was. He left. So Jellyman was fired because he was a bit directionless and didn't have as much talent, which is probably a horrible thing to say, and Fish had to do it because he wasn't the best at. You're big and tall and overpowering. Who do you point your fingers at? You're pointing them at someone like Fish to say, "Hey, go and fire that man over there." They're not going to argue with you. They were supporting a band called Alice, and they had a keyboard player, Irish keyboard player called Mark Kelly, who was throwing shapes all over the stage and throwing his keyboards all over the place, doing very much his best to be Keith Emerson from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And they saw this guy and they chatted amongst the band and they said, "Look, we want Mark Kelly in the band." And it sort of fate goes to fate that Mark said yes. They fired Brian, in came Mark. All right, and then now, right then, almost the full lineup for the band. But soon after that gig, they realised that the bass player, Diz Minute. Now, it was quite sad because Diz was a very close friend of Fish, and Fish says to this day apocryphally that he wouldn't want to fire him. He thought he was a good bass player, but they decided that he wasn't good enough if the band was going to go forward, because at this time they were playing the Marquee in London. They were, sell-out nights, night after night. They were getting a very big following. They had a fanzine that started called The Web, which it's an historic fanzine because of the length of time it's been going since 1982. And they just needed to move forward, and they found a local bass player who was probably the most of the musicians in the band. He was actually the most experienced musician of the band. That's Pete Travaris. He had been in a band called Orphis, which is a prog band, but mainly he'd been in and recorded with and toured with a local Aylesbury new wave band called the Meteors. and he's an extremely gifted bass player. And so there you go. Right then and there, you had the lineup for the first album. You had Mick Pointer on drums, Pete Tawaris on bass, Mark Kelly on keys, Fish on vocals, and Stephen Rothery on guitar. And at that time, it was the definitive lineup. Obviously, the bass, much happened after the first album, and just before the first tour as well. We'll get into that in a moment. They did record. They got into the studio and recorded, charting the single "Grendel Marguerite," and those songs came to be classics later on in the band's touring. Fish used to had very bad stage fright, and so he used to paint his face with all sorts of colours. I think almost to hide, sometimes to emote, to create that jester feel like he has in his characters in the songs, and a lot of the time it was just to hide his shyness. And he, being a typical boy of that certain generation, he had no idea. He originally used nail polish on his face. Can you believe it? Like proper nail polish. He couldn't get it off. It burnt his skin. And then he found a store in Aylesbury that sold theatrical makeup and started using Leishner and Leishner stage makeup, and away you go. They managed to go and get from a Hammer Horror. They were selling off all their sets and costumes, and they got like crosses and wreaths and tombstones. They got some fabric sackcloth clothing that had a big eye on it, and if you stood in front of the main lights, it would go completely invisible, like completely see-through. And they didn't realise until the third or fourth gig that if they stood in front of the stage lights, the audience were getting a good eyeful, because most of them were wearing underpants. Well, Fish wasn't anyway. There you go. So disc's gone and the lineup is ready to go. So Diz went off to and also another little connection with Pete Tawaris is that he played with Robin Bolt on learned to play guitar with Robin Bolt. Robin Bolt was Fish's solo guitarist for most of his albums until Robin retired, and you could sort of, it's a nice little connection, isn't it? I think when it comes to these little avenues. And here we go. So we then go on our tour, and we now release the album. And here's the fun part, the album review. So that's Marillion, right? Marillion's had several phases. That was my butchered and basic rundown of the early Marillion. Of course, basically is how I remember it. You had the Mick Pointer years on drums, and then you have the Ian Mosley year on drums, and then you have the Fish era, and then you have the Stephen Hogarth era on vocals. Outside of the band has stayed the same. I sit very, very firmly in the only listen to the Fish era Marillion. First two Hogarth albums, Season's End and Holidays in the Sun. I do like Holidays in Eden. I do like some of the mid to late albums like Marbles and Afraid of Sunlight. They got a little bit middle of the roady, a little bit dull. The last album is a cracker. It's probably their best they've done in 15 years. So I'd recommend that one. But otherwise, outside of that, no, it's been a little bit bland skis for me. So, about to go and warm my tea up. I've just been in 1 second. Come on then. My little darling cat has arrived again. And we'll get to the other side and we'll talk about the album itself, the singles from the album, the sound of the album, and I'll give a little rundown of how I feel about it. And hopefully you will get and have a listen to this masterwork of an album. Anyway, see you on the other side, guys. Bye for now.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New subscribers only. Renew for 12 months to lock in savings. Taxes and fees extra. Additional restrictions apply. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Since 2013, Bombas has donated over 100 million socks, underwear, and T-shirts to those facing homelessness. If we counted those on air, this ad would last over 1,157 days. But if we counted the time it takes to make a donation possible, it would take just a few clicks. Because every time you make a purchase, Bombas donates an item to someone who needs it.
Go to bombas.com/ACAST and use code ACAST for 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com/ACAST, code ACAST.
Welcome back, guys, to part 2. So, if you can hear, I've got my little purry cat on my lap, so if she interferes or knocks a mic or whatever, we don't care, do we? So, the album itself, I did take you through a very basic history of the band. If I've got anything wrong, guys, I probably have. I'm using some really good, interesting source material, and I make notes, and sometimes I just don't read my own proper handwriting. So, released on the 13th of March 1983 on EMI Records, Script for a Jester's Tear, what's considered a neo-prog revivalist album. I think there's a big, I think that's a big name for something that is basically just a really good rock album that has progressive leanings. It reached number 7 in the album charts in the UK, and spent 31 weeks in the charts, and it went platinum. Produced 2 top 40 single in He Knows You Know and a top 20 single in Garden Party. It is, for me, the band's. I think it's the people. There's a lot of talk about which is the best Fish era Marillion album. Is it Script for Jester's Tear? Is it Fugazi? A lot of people will say no to that. Is it Misplaced Childhood, or is it the classic, solid gold classic, Clutching at Straws? I'm going to say that I live in the part that I think they're all equally as good as each other. I look at it in a way of a child, a teenager growing up. Okay, so for me, it's like this is the adolescence of the band. Fugazi is the drinking, hard-bitten 21, 22-year-old. Thinks he knows life, knows everything. Misplaced Childhood is the yearning for the childhood that we just had in the first album, and then Clutching at Straws is the drunken hangover album. And so a lot of people have said that Fish's lyrics, like Genesis's lyrics, are sometimes fill every gap that he can, because he's not a guitarist, not an instrumentalist, so lyrics are his most important part, and so sometimes he does fill the space too much and doesn't let the band breathe. Not so much on this album, very much evident on Fugazi, on a couple of the tracks. This album, though, itself is it does just for reference, guys, I'm listening to the original 83 release. I'm not listening to the 97 remix or the 2021 Avril McIntosh reissue and remix. Even though they're brilliant, I'm listening to the original one because it's how I heard it. Now, it's an interesting, because when you listen to this album, so when they fired, because they fired Nick Pointer, the original drummer, just before the tour for this album, because he wasn't a good enough drummer. Now, he formed the band. I feel very bad about that. Fish again had to do the job. But when you listen to the drums on this album, you can see why they did fire him, actually. I listened to it again with critical ears. You hear my lovely cat purring? I listened again with critical ears. I thought I've always listened to it with fan ears and never really had a critical listen to it. And all the way through this album, the drums just don't hit. Now, is it the recording of the drums? Possibly. Is it because Chris Kimsey recorded this? No, Nick Talbot. Hang on, sorry. Nick Talbot was Fugazi. Let me just. Oh, see, you come for this. Yeah, this is what you come for. Where are we? Production. Nick Talbot, yes, Nick Talbot. And it's a bit thin, it's almost like he doesn't quite get to the drum in the time for the beat. It, particularly on things like, I noticed when I was listening again today, on the drums on He Knows You Know and on Forgotten Sons, he sort of doesn't quite get there. He sort of gets to the roll, he does his drum roll, and then it's almost like he's not hitting it hard enough. And when they replaced him with Ian Mosley, who played with Curved Air and Camel, I mean, he had a big sound, a big kit. He hit hard, and I think that's what they needed. Anyway, so the cover itself of the album was painted by Classic. I mean, he's now this particular artist has put his mark to everything from Iron Maiden to Judas Priest. This is Mark Wilkinson. And his first piece of work was with Marillion on their Script for Jesters Tear album. It's a beautiful double album. You have to get the double album to open up and look at the artwork. So the Jester in his bed set, lots of connections to the songs. There's a piece of paper on the floor where it's music, like with the Jester's violin music, and EMI had to get that checked. And it was actually a Beatles, I think it's a Beatles song, and they had to get permission from Paul McCartney to have it on the front of the album written down, and he said yes. Interesting. I mean, I would, in the days of litigation, I suppose you have to do that sort of stuff, don't you? And so it didn't do very well in America. It reached 175 in the charts. Well, the Americans were never going to get it. They were never going to get it. Sorry, guys. You probably do now, and I know the Fish does well in America, but back then, no. And it was released in America through Capitol Records. I've got a copy of it on Capitol Records, and I've got it on EMI. It's a really, really beautiful piece of artwork on there. It released the singles. So the two singles, He Knows You Know, came off. Actually, the first single came off the album was not actually on the album. The first single that came off the album was Marcus Square Heroes. Now, Marcus Square Heroes is a brilliant double A-sided single with Three Boats Down from the Candy, and B-sided with Grendel. Very rarely these days do you get, I mean, it doesn't happen anymore where singles don't get released on the album. But it was good then because it was something different. This is the hard. When I first heard Marcus Square Heroes, I thought it was the hardest song, one of the hardest songs I'd ever heard, and I'd been listening to Iron Maiden. This heavy song about. It's basically about. I mean, you remember this is Thatcher's Britain that Fish is growing up in, right? That they're becoming informative in, and there's strikes, and there's the IRA, and there's terrorism before the Americans told us what terrorism was. We've been living with terrorism since before I was born. 9/11 wasn't the first time this happened. Sadly, it wasn't. But we'd living with it forever. And Fish says that when he wrote Forgotten Sons, because there was a bombing, and I remember it vividly when Sefton. There was a horse. The IRA blew up some horses at a parade in Hyde Park and killed all these horses but they were more interested. The newspapers were more interested about the horses than the men that died. Sefton was one of them. Sefton went down in Hyde Park. I remember that vividly. And so Fish often cites that Forgotten Sons. We're going too far forward anyway. Songs as we go. So Market Square Heroes, Three Boats Down from the Candy, which is a song about, it has one of the best opening bass lines. I just love it. It's about, it's very Fish, it's very wordy, isn't it? So the Candy is the seaside front where we sell the lollies and the floss, the candy floss and the rock and all the sweets. And the three boats were the three boats on the beaches, boats on the beach. And those boats were turned upside down most of the time. And that's where teenagers would get under with each other and have sex and do what teenagers do. And so that's why it's three boats down from the Candy. So it's like a loss of virginity song. Again, all these songs on this album they're either lost love, lost virginity, and then it suddenly takes a sharp turn into Forgotten Sons, where it becomes very political. But musically, this album is beautifully mixed. It's really big space. There's a lot of space in the instrumentation of this album. You put it on and you can almost feel the room around each member of the band playing. It doesn't feel like they're in a tight cavernous recording studio. It sounds like you've got them, Pete's bass is wrapping around you, even though mixed drums are, now thinking about it, not as good as they could be. They're still doing a great job. They're still bringing the beat along. They're a bit thin in the mix, but even the later mixes couldn't fix that. Then you've got Stephen Rothery. Now Stephen Rothery, we haven't even scratched on Stephen Rothery. Stephen Rothery is definitely, not possibly, definitely one of England's greatest guitarists. Dave Gilmour said he was his favourite guitarist, and that says a lot. Now, he didn't play a million notes, okay? He's very much in the same vein as Stephen Hackett, where they play. It's minimal notes. It's not what he doesn't. It's not what he plays. It's what he doesn't play. He's all about atmosphere, creating noise and atmosphere on his guitar, and some of the stuff he does is beautiful. So the B-side of Market Square Heroes is Grendel, and Grendel is glorious in every way possible. Yes, some of it does sound like something from Genesis's cinema show or Supper's Ready. Yes, it's 17 minutes long, and yes, on the B-side, when you got the 12-inch, because it was only on the 12-inch, you had to play it at 33 1/3 instead of 45. But it was 17 minutes of wonderful, nerdy, glorious absurdity, all based around Beowulf, the oldest surviving text of the Saxons, or it's the epic poem, and Grendel is one of the sort of the demons, the creatures in that terrifies the villagers. And it's a song based around Grendel, so from the point of Grendel, not from the point of the Vikings or the Saxons or the villagers, okay? And it goes through so many different time changes. You can tell it's different pieces of music put together. It really, really is brilliant. I think it is up there with their best ever work. I know that people will roll their eyes and go 17 minutes, but you don't roll your eyes when you listen to 12 minutes of Iron Maiden, do you? Or even 17 minutes now of Iron Maiden with Empire of the Clouds. No, you don't, do you? None of you do. You go, this is brilliant. So you need to sort of turn gear and listen to this piece of music. Yes, it's clunky in some areas. Yes, Steve often plays too much in E in this particular E solos in this particular piece of music. Yes, it sometimes loses direction, stops and starts again, but it's because it's just glorious storytelling. That's why you read classic novels, right? Anyway, that's the first single off of it, which I have picture disc, 12-inch single, import. Yeah, I think I've got a few of them. Then came He Knows You Know, which is the drug song, okay? I'm not going to go into it, we're going to go track by track. So let's start off with the opening track on side A, which is Script for a Jester's Tear. Alright, the eponymous title album. Alright, it's 8 minutes and 40 seconds long. It's a love song. It's a lost love song. It's about a boy who's lost the love of his life. Clearly, the love is over. I don't know if it's love has gone both sides, although the lyric does, I still say I love you. I mean, it's still clearly, I think it's she leaving him. Now, a lot of criticisms of I've heard about this album, and Fish in general, is that his lyric is quite schoolboy rhyming, and it's a lot quite misogynistic because it's all about men and boys. Well, come on, guys, take a step back, you fucking idiots. What do you think it is? He's a 21-year-old male. He's going to write what he knows about. It's no good him writing some fake story from the girl's point of view when he has no idea what that means. It's like writing great comedy, and Python is one of those things. Great comedy, often the male writers struggle to write for females. It's not because they are misogynistic or hate women or don't understand women, is they don't have a reference point. So it's much harder for them to write. And what are they going to fake what they write, or write something they know about? And this is what he knows about. Everyone has loved and everyone has lost. And this is a good example of him lost love. Great lyrics. I'm losing on the roundabouts. I'm losing on the swings. I'm losing on the roundabouts. It's that lovely, fantastic sort of imagery of the roundabout. Life goes round and round. And of course, losing on the swings and losing on the roundabouts is also a playground, isn't it? Because there's the love of the innocence and young love, pure love almost, because sex is not involved in it. You're in the playground, and you're losing your first love. All right, and there's that fantastic, I said, swings. So swings, a good imagery of things, going back and going forth and going back and going high and coming down, highs and lows, and roundabouts, things keep going around and returning back. And I think it's a brilliant lyrical ploy on his part with this song. It is a great opening song. It has Fish is at this time he could sing that register. He can't do it anymore. Very falsetto and soulful and high and yearning, and it's just a great live song. I've seen him play it live many times, and it is one of those songs that I go back to quite a lot. And when I've left girlfriends, left them somewhere, couldn't find them. No, when they've left me in the past, often that was one of the songs that I would go back to. Or Kaylee, sounds really wanky, I suppose, but it is one that I would go back to. And so it's a great solo. Steve's solo in it is just beautiful. Pete's bass, I was always, first of all, I was quite nonplussed about Pete's bass lines. I used to think nothing of them until I heard them, and they'd been put, like, they 10 or the other, all you could hear was the bass line, so they'd been soloed, and I could hear them, just him playing, and he's a great bass player. He alternates between picking and fingering the bass, and that's how he gets that sort of kind of do 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 do, really nice sort of chromatic scale bass line, and it's really suits the piece of music really well. And even mixed drums, they're splashy, they're light, they don't overtake the track. And Mark Kelly's keys, Mark Kelly, sometimes you think, did he play on this track? And then you realise, yes, he did. He was there, and without him, it would be quite thin. He's got, he uses a mixture of Rolands, Moogs. He had a Hammond. I think he used a Leslie cabinet. Quite a few different things. Did Mark? I think it was emulating his hero in Emerson, Keith Emerson. And of course, lyrically, it's some of the lyrics have been said that there have been people that have said that some of the lyrical pieces are stolen from Mark Hamill's work with Van der Graaf Generator. Don't know if I sort of agree with that, but Then we move into He Knows You Know. So He Knows You Know is the second single off the album. Sorry, the first single, second single off the album, and it's the drug song. I wrote a school thing for my O levels around this song, for one of my English O level degrees, and it's basically about, as I said before at the beginning of this thing, there's different messages, and Script for Jesters Tear is loved, lost, from a young age, and then He Knows You Know is the drug. Sorry, my fucking computer. Sorry, excuse me here, guys. Tappity. There we go. Is the drug story. It talks about China bowl, praying to the China bowl, so he's been sick into the toilet. It's about putting needles in his veins. You got caught, my darling. You okay? Here she goes. So the lyric for that song is one of the most hard-hitting that I remember from a young age. An intravenous drug abuse is not something that a 13-year-old really should be thinking about, but it was there, Its B-side was charting the single, which is I don't even know how to describe that song. It's, I think, just about them being in a band and touring and being famous again, and what you do to make records. It's got a great drum intro into it, actually, and to be honest, it's really good when Ian Mosley plays the drums on that. Fish often introduces the He Knows You Know as the drug song. It was inspired by Fish's use of drugs while he was on benefits, waiting for the band to be famous. He famously was an alcoholic for many years, and not that he didn't take hard drugs, but he obviously took drugs. It was recorded at the Marquee Studios, like the album was, which I forgot to mention. Sorry. And it's 3 minutes and 30 seconds on the single, and 5 minutes and 5 seconds on the 12-inch. Right. The front cover is a picture of the Jester pulling its mask away to reveal its face, and that's Mark Wilkinson's face that he copied underneath for that particular single. I've got the picture disc version of it. It's pretty cool. They got onto Top of the Pops with this song, which was no mean feat, because Top of the Pops, although it was probably they probably got on as the novelty act, as it often did with Top of the Pops. Yeah. Anyway, so the track listing on the 7-inch, He Knows You Know on the A side, B side charting the single. On the 12-inch, you had He Knows You Know, and then the edit version of He Knows You Know, and then charting the single. So that's the drug song. So we've had our Loss of Love, then we have our drug song, and then we have to come into the web. Now the web baffles me sometimes. Okay, it's got all sorts of textures in the web. It really is. Sorry, knock the mic. It's 8 minutes and 48 seconds long. There's ancillary noises. So you've got like people talking in the background. You've got One second, I'm gonna pull up the lyric and I'm gonna talk you through it. So it opens with this really sort of stark, dun 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 dun, sort of. I'm not doing it well, but it has this sort of brilliant sort of attacking opening. And the lyric starts with, the rain additions at my window, its symphony echoes in my womb. My gaze scans the walls of this apartment to rectify the confines of my tomb. I'm the cyclops in the tenement, I'm the soul without the cause, crying midst my rubber plants, ignoring beckoning doors. So again, it's that bed-sitter-land. So I've heard Fish describe it as bed-sitter-land music. Where art college girls would have rubber plants which they would water regularly, look after and feed, and often you had to live in your one room apartment. Bed sitters in the UK are like a bed, a sink, a kitchenette, all in one room. And the web is basically about that. It's about the feeling of being trapped within that confined, and got lyrics, clippings from ancient newspapers like scattered across the floor, stained by the wine from the shattered glass, meaningless words yellowed by time, faded photos exposing pain, celluloid leeches bleeding my mind. You finished playing hangman, you cast the fateful dice. Advise me, this shroud will not suffice. He's a very, very clever man. He's probably one of the greatest lyricists in music. I truly believe that. Him, John Lydon, Elvis Costello, Billy Bragg, there's quite a few of them. But he's just has this sometimes a bit too intelligent, where you'll say 4 words instead of 1, and I'm guilty of that when I'm writing reviews. Sometimes I'll write 4 things, I'll make it flowery, and it probably shouldn't need to be. Again, it's my influence from this big fella. All right, like the lyric: the fly trap needs the insects, the ivy cresses the wall, needles make love to the junkies, the sirens seduce with their call. Confidence has deserted me, with you it has forsaken me. Confused and rejected, despised and alone, I kiss isolation on its fevered brow. Again, this is it. So first track, you've got your lost love. Second track, your drug song. This one is your bed-sitter land song. So there is a lot of emotion in this album. Musically, I think the web is the most complex of the albums on the album, because it comes from way back in the early Marillion and Silver Marillion days, and it suits the lyric. It's quite dirgy, quite dark, quite let's just say that it's heavy, in a good way. It's heavy in a way that can be quite syrupy, quite thick. Peter Duvaris's bass is probably the leading light in this particular track. It really guides everything through. When I said everything before was the album had a good open sound, like every song had space around it. I think this one feels like everything's all closed in, and it's often cited as one of the weaker songs on the album. I don't agree. I'll tell you what I think is the weakest song on the album in a very few minutes. Now, we're going to come to this is a longer episode, guys, because it's my year show. So I'm going to put another little break in just so I can get my tea warmed up, and we'll come back for part 3 when we'll head into the next few songs. But yes, so the web. So we've gone lost love, we've gone drug abuse, we've gone loneliness, and the sense of being trapped in the web. And what happens after this one, let's find out, shall we? I'll see you after the break. Welcome back, guys, to this epic, longer episode for my birthday episode with one of my favourite albums of all time and one of my favourite bands. And this one is, we move into the next track, which is the second single and last single off the album, Garden Party. Garden Party is a fascinating snapshot of the period of time. If any of you've ever watched The Young Ones, you'll understand that there is this, in England, there is and still is now, a class society, okay? The haves and the have-nots, the rich, the poor, the middle class, and the working class. Now, I come from that working class background, quite poor families I've mentioned before, and Fish is very the same. His father owned and ran a petrol station, and he was going to be a forester, and that would have been good for him, but he decided to follow his musical dreams, and therefore he was not really moneyed, even though they come into money. Fish wrote the song Garden Party about the Cambridge set, because he was living in Cambridge with his girlfriend while they were in the Stone Dome band, and there is that sense of, if you've ever seen the Young Ones episode where they go the University Challenge, it used to be a quiz show in the UK for posh school kids. It was like it was usually college against college, a University Challenge, and in the Young Ones they're like the scumbag college against the posh ones. And anyway, that's basically what Fish is pointing his fingers at in Garden Party. You know, cucumber sandwiches that the crust's on, you know, Vickers, all that sort of gear. They called it was sort of subtitled as the Great Cucumber Massacre. I have it with a poster, the picture disc, the single, and I've got quite a few of these things actually. In fact, I'm a collector, so I've got a lot of the stuff. And it's all based around snobbery, as is the right word. Snobbery is the right word, I think, for this particular. It was actually written. Diz Minute and Brian Gilliman have got their names on the sort of list because they did help write the music and I think some of the lyric for it. It's quite controversial because there's a lyric in it that says, "I'm punting on the grass. I'm beagling, I'm whining, reclining, I'm fucking." Right? Now, they did change that to rucking, as in the sort of rugby lyric, but we know it's fucking, because the 7-inch single, like with I forgot to mention it, the Marcus Square Heroes single, the lyric that says, "I am your Antichrist." They made it change it for the single to "I am your battle priest," for radio airplay. Ridiculous, because you know John Lydon had been singing Antichrist. No one had said anything, but EMI is EMI, I suppose. Now let me get you the lyric here. Okay. Again, this is a really clever, because it opens with the sound of sprinklers and bird play, and it sounds like you're in the lawns and it's summertime and you're punting on the cam. All right, which is one of the lyrics. All right. Let me just get the lyric up. I love this little tool I've got with the lyrics. I mean, I could just get the record out, but no, I don't do that. Okay, there we go. I just use Spotify and it's Garden Party held today. Invites called the Debs to play. So Debs are debutantes, okay? Social climbers polish ladders. Wayward sons again have fathers. Hello, Dad. Hello, Dad. Edgy eggs and cucumbers. I mean, silly, playful word play, but it's very much. This is Marillion's, I think, one of the only time they ever really point fingers at Genesis, and this is their version of Genesis, the Battle of Epping Forest, from Selling England by the Pound, which is another great connection because I've got a bootleg of Selling Fish by the Pound. Time has come again for slaughter on the lawns by Still Cam Waters. That's the River Cam near Cambridge. A slaughter, it's a slaughter. Champagne corks are firing at the sun. Swooping swallows chased by violins again. Strafed by Strauss, they sulk in crumbling eaves again. Oh God, not again. So it's basically about, if you read that lyric there, swooping swallows chased by violins, strafed by Strauss, so obviously classical music, and sulking crumbling eaves, so they go and hide in their classrooms and learn their Latin and their declension. Couples loiter in the cloisters, social leeches quoting Chaucer. Look, so it is a little bit playful, a little by the book lyric. Okay, Fish is learning, he's growing here. Remember, this isn't the complicated lyric that's on his solo stuff or even on the Clutching at Straw albums. This is the early Fish learning his way, right? Doctor's son, a parson's daughter, why not, it should be order. Please don't lie upon the grass unless accompanied by a fellow. May I be so bold as to perhaps suggest Othello. So you couldn't lie in the grass in Cambridge unless a fellow member of the, was with you. And can I suggest Othello? It's just being, again, it's all this. One of my favourite lyrics in it is, Angie chalks another blue, mother smile, she did it too. Chitters chat and gossips lash, posers pose and pressman's flash. And then you hear this flash and flash and flash. It's really a crowded lyric, okay? It's a really crowded lyric, but it's fun. And, actually, a little bit of a side note, the video doesn't have Mick Pointer on it. It has the ex-drummer from Camel. One second. Andy Ward. They got him in once they fired Mick on the tour while they were touring the album, and because he's Camel, right? It's prog royalty, but he was much older and he had drug issues, and so he didn't last. But he's on the video for Mick Pointer's not in that video, sadly. Anyway, so there's that's Garden Party. Oh, I keep knocked the thing again. Sorry guys, bang, crash, wallop. That's Garden Party. I think Garden Party, as I said, is their answer to, as I said, Battle for Epping Forest. Not as wordy as Battle, not as long as Battle, but certainly that absurdity of English middle class university snobs. And how the outside people in the outside of the society see that, garden parties and so on. It's not all that. It's not all, is it? I mean, it can't all be that, but that's how they saw it. And again, at that time, Fish was living in that community, and obviously he was an outsider, and he saw it that way. But it's the most fun, I think, on the single. If you can have fun on this album, that's the way to do it. The next one comes in. This is the weakest song on the album for me. This is Chelsea Monday. Okay. How do I just? Chelsea Monday is, again, it's sort of like Lost Love again. It's about a girl that disappears, and from this guy, probably Fish's life. It's got some interesting loop sound effects. This one does sound really open. When I listen to this song, I almost can picture the River Thames and London and of a sprawling city and a girl disappearing and not wanting to be found anymore. And there's a great sort of spoken word bit in the middle 8 with Peter Tavares going, did you see Estelle last night? And all that sort of stuff, like basically where is she sort of thing. And the lyric is okay. The lyric for me is tortured. And I hate saying that because it's like one of those defining albums of my life. But I find this. Here we go. Look, catalogue princess, apprentice adulteress, hiding in her cellophane world in Glittertown, awaiting the prince in his white capri. Dynamic young Tarzan courts the bedsit queen. She's playing the actress in this bedroom scene. She's learning her lines from glossy magazines, stringing all her pearls from her childhood dreams, auditioning for the leading role on the silver screen. So it's also. It's also about, coming into a big city, try and find fame and fortune, be an actress, but then disappearing. One day they'll really love you, you'll charm them with that smile, but for now it's just another Chelsea Monday. Again, it's that bedsit link, isn't it? She's probably living in Chelsea, he's probably connected with Fish, probably knew her living in Chelsea when he was in London. because they lived in London ostensibly once they recorded Miss Page, Scrifford Jesters here. They moved up to London to record at the Marquee and to tour, because London was the centre of it. And in fact, they were one of the first bands ever to headline the famous Hammersmith Odeon on the recital for the Script tour. I think they did it 12 nights in a row, which is massive. Absolutely massive. And they did that off the back of no radio play or single-friendly music. Drifting with her licence in the labyrinth of London, playing games with faces in the neon wonderland, performed to scattered shadows on the shattered cobbled aisles. Would she dare recite soliloquies at the risk of stark applause? This is what I'm saying. Fish, I love you to bits, man. I really do. But this is a tortured lyric. And, fished a young chick out of the old father. See, okay, right? Old Father Thames. So now we get to the end of the lyric. She is clearly found. She's dead. So she's either committed suicide because she couldn't cope with all the looks on their faces, saying we knew you couldn't make it, or she was murdered, or she ended up in pornography, as a lot of young girls do. It is a really sad song. It is really deep. It's very, very textured. Steve's guitar work in this is brilliant. You take the lyric away, I think, and have it as a piece of instrumental music, and you'd go, wow, that's one of the best one of the best pieces of music you would hear in a very long time. But Fish does, he just tortures it a bit. Just another Chelsea Monday. I mean, it does say, oh, let's go and open a vein, I have to say, this song. But, it sits in the album. It's perfect for the album, because it is what it is. It sits amongst the lyrical theme for this album. And Fish is, let's be brutally frank, listeners and friends. It's easy. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. Writing songs about lost love and acquired love and sadness and woe is me. It's been billions of hours of music through the history of music. Modern music has been played in that ballpark, right? It's easier to write a song about depression and sadness than it is to write a song about happiness, because people don't want to hear songs about happiness all the time, do they? They want to feel sometimes that life isn't all about that. It's not all sunshine and roses. And I think that lyrically, and a lot of prog is also that way. A lot of prog was always based around that sort of sadness and confusion of life. So that's Chelsea Monday. Great lyrics, great little bits of interplay, some tape loop stuff going on. It feels dreary. It feels like the web, which is also dreary. It feels like there's rain. It feels like it's London. It's overcast. It's a bright spark, a beautiful soul of a human being has come to do something different and new, and has lost their life doing it. It could be also autobiographical, because Fish felt very lost in London and didn't feel that they were going in the direction they should be going, even though they were selling lots of records and becoming famous. It wasn't quite where he thought it was happening, and he famously had a wandering eye. Young good-looking man in a rock band with money, and a sort of sexy Scottish accent. The London girls, and they loved him. Anyway, that's Chelsea Monday. Would I take it from the album? In hindsight, no, because it's really, really important. Do I like it? Not really. And have I in the past skipped it? Yeah, I don't anymore, because I appreciate the album as a whole. But yeah, I used to skip it, and it is a little bit tortured in his lyric. The story is brilliant, and it, I said sort of autobiographical, but it is a little bit tortured. Steve's guitar, Pete's bass is wonderful. Again, Mick gets lost in the drum on this, I have to say. There's a gate on the drums, so they've put it so it's sort of the drum is reverberating back, so there's a gate. So it's clever, and it's very Floydy in some respects, but it's not. You can see why they moved him on. You can. It just doesn't. He doesn't hold enough strength. And we're moving into the next track, which is, my favourite track on this album, the song that really cemented for me my love of the band, and the reason why I think they're one of the heaviest rock bands on the planet. Not metal, no, heavy rock bands. And a lot of people say that they don't think that Marillion are actually a progressive band, which I think they sort of are right, in the respect that they, unlike some of the neo prog bands that came out, like Pentagram and bands like that, that were much more flowery and British. You know what I mean? I've said that. What progressive? I said to you before. It's more softer, pastoral storylines. This Marillion is more Floydy in the effect that they are more political and more edgy, yet they're softer than Floyd, but they are heavier than Floyd. So often Marillion gets put on heavy metal compilations and hard rock compilations, and I'm absolutely agree with you. They push my heavy rock button, but they also push my prog button. Forgotten Sons is a masterwork. I really wish this had been released as a single. I think because it's 8 minutes long, it couldn't be. Fischoff introduces this as the IRA song, okay, about how we send over men to fight and to protect in Ireland, why secular violence and so on. It has one of the most hard-hitting middle eights of any song you'll ever hear. Okay, he uses the Lord's Prayer a lot in this song. Okay, I think this lyrically is Fish's peak. Now, people say no, stuff off Clutching at Straws, like Warm Wet Circles and stuff, Misplaced Childhood. No, I don't think. I think this is it. The lyric starts with Armalite, street lights, night sights, searching the roofs for a sniper, a viper, a fighter, deaf in the shadows, he'll maim you, he'll wound you, he'll kill you, for long forgotten cause. I mean, that straight away is like, oh, it's like a bullet to the chest, like a smack in the face, and it's heavy, guys. It's heavy. It's Stephen Rothery's guitar is layered, and it wants to rip your face off. It's that heavy, right? Boys baptized in wars, but boys, but morphine, chill scream, bad dream, serving as numbers on dog tags, glad rags, sandbags. Your girl was married, your best friend, love's end, poison pen. Your flesh will always creep, tossing, turning, sleep. The wounds that burn so deep. So you've gone to war. You've gone somewhere where you shouldn't be. You're fighting a ceaseless, meaningless conflict, and your girlfriend's left you and married your best friend. Your mother's. No, this is my favourite bit. So it starts to come down to a sort of a hushed tone, and it's a staccato guitar, drummers hitting in the background, and I think this is Mick Pointer's best drumming. The bass is driving, the keyboard is wheeling behind you all over the place, right? 1 second. Yeah, so it goes quite quiet, okay, and then you get this. Sorry about the pause there. I had to stop it for a second because little Phoebes jumped in the room. I didn't know where I was going. Okay, where we go? Here we go. Right. Your mother sits on the edge of the world when the cameras start to roll. Panoramic viewpoints resurrect the killing foal. Your father drains another beer. He's one of the few that cares, calling behind a Saracen's hull from the safety of his living room chair. It's just wonderful. It's just about mum being terrified that his son's gone to war. There is when he's doing it does minister, care for your children. It does the Lord's Prayer. You've also got this here, a line again. Why? So you cut the single for saying Antichrist, but you hear it goes, verbal masturbation in the guarded bureaucratic wombs. Minister, care for your children. Order them into damnation to eliminate those who would trespass against you. For those is the kingdom, the power, the glory, forever and ever. Amen. It's just brilliant. I'm not going to go on the whole lyric, but it's got a brilliant breakdown, an amazing guitar solo by Stephen Rothery. It's just probably the most political song I've ever heard by Marillion. It's one of my favourite top political songs of all time. I go back to every time. Fish's live performance of it is amazing. It fishes out this album. It feels like it shouldn't even be on the album. It feels like a separate track. It feels like a separate piece. It doesn't feel like the storyline matches. It's like love's lost, love labours, and then suddenly there's a war piece. Now, Fish did say that he was in his bedsit watching, I said, the bombing in Hyde Park, and it made him think he had to write a song about it. It's brave of them to put it on the album because it sort of sits differently in the mix, but I think it's a brilliant way to finish the album out. And for me, that's me coming to the end of this episode, guys, because we're at 1 hour and 13 minutes almost, or more than that. Thank you for listening to me chat on about my favourite album, and for supporting me for a year. I hope that you do go and put on Marillion's Script for a Jester's tier. I hope you fall in love with the band and follow them. Do tell me what you think about the different tracks in the album, what your opinions are. As I said, brilliant. Everything brilliant. Could I give or take Chelsea Monday? Probably could. Forgotten Sons. It is so heavy. It is as heavy can be without being heavy metal. Let's just say that, all right? The lyrical content, Fish's vocal performance, Pete's bass on it is amazing. Steve's guitar is forever brilliant. Even Mick, no, actually not. Mick Pointer's drums do feel lost on this. It feels backwards a bit. That's okay. That happens, and if you hear later mixes of it with Ian Mosley playing the drums, you'll hear the difference when they do it later, touring. If you get to listen to some live albums, and there are live versions of it out there, it is absolutely solid gold, brilliant. And watch the live if you get a chance to. I did put it on my Facebook page, the video for it. Watch Fish's very theatrical, because he's very theatrical anyway on stuff. What he was very theatrical, and you'll see why this song really why it means what it does to me. Anyway, that's the end of it for me. That's Script for a Jester's tier, a solid gold classic. Thank you for listening to this longer episode, as it is my birthday, the show's birthday. And we'll come back now. The next week's episode will be. Are we in September yet? Next week? Yes, we are. So in September will be Black Sabbath month, guys. So 4 weeks of Black Sabbath worship. I will be going through 4 of my favourite Sabbath albums. I won't be going over the history of the band. We all know the history of the band. It will just be a real deep dive into each album. There'll be some surprises. There might be no surprises. There should be some interesting omissions. And I will also do a follow-up episode of my honourable mentions here for this one, for September, month of September. Anyway, keep yourself safe. Keep listening. Do enjoy Marillion in both eras. You don't just go, Tony says that the Hogarth eras aren't very good, that if I'm not going there, don't do that. Do give it a go. You might absolutely love it. And I know friends of mine who are big Marillion fans who love both eras. As I said, I got hooked by a big, tall, 6'5" Scotsman, and his theatrics, his voice, and his appeal, and I sort of ever so slightly stuck in that time zone. And that era. I will do a separate Fish album thing, but next month, as I said, back to the metal, back to Sabbath, and keep safe, guys. Keep rocking. Bye for now. Bye-bye.